boogeyman.
Welcome to the Inferno. I'm Papa John, and I'm here to guide you through all the hellish sides of horror. And a couple weeks back, Spiral from the Book of Saw was released, and I've gone through and reviewed all 9 films in the franchise, and so today I am going to rank them. Now this is my ranking, it's not yours, and so let's get started. And coming in last place is Saw 5. I really am not a big fan of the Strahm and Hoffman rivalry. I kind of hate it because they're like my least favorite characters in the franchise. Them going head to head and as main characters, it just really drives down 4 and 5 for me. Both of them are better in Saw 5 than they were in 4. The movie as a whole just brings it down because the Traps storyline doesn't really at all connect to anything going on in the police investigation. The theme that it's going for with the Traps storyline is fine and dandy, but the execution just feels very Wonder Pets-like.
What's gonna work? Teamwork! What's gonna work? Teamwork!
And next up is Saw 4, the other movie that deals with the Strahm and Hoffman rivalry. I find Strahm in particular extremely annoying in this movie, and it's not just the performance, it's the editing around the character, and particularly in the interrogation scenes when he's interrogating John Kramer's wife. I find those scenes god-awfully annoying, and it's edited like it's a trap sequence, and it's horrible. Now the Trap storyline does elevate this one ahead of Saw 5 because I do really enjoy kind of what they're going for with obsession, and I like the idea of the story that they're going for, even though in execution it has a lot of issues. But there are some very creative traps that I really did enjoy, in particular the one that deals with kind of the rapist and his trap. And coming in at number 7 is Jigsaw. Now, visually, I actually think this is the best in the franchise. I think it's the best shot and best looking movie in the franchise. But the rest of it just feels extremely forgettable. I don't think anything is necessarily terrible in the way that like the interrogation scenes were in 4. And I found parts of the twist, primarily the prequel side of the twists, very predictable. And it just felt like a last-ditch effort to capitalize on the John Kramer story, which had already been dragged out long enough, in my opinion. And honestly, the main reason it falls this low is simply because it's easily the most unnecessary sequel in the franchise. You can pluck it out, and it changes absolutely nothing. And next up, we have Saw 3D, or Saw the Final Chapter, which is probably higher on my list than most people. And that's just honestly because I really enjoy watching this movie, and I love this whole fraud and exploration of fraud concept and theme that this movie goes for. And I think they actually execute it fairly well in terms of the theme. Now, there are some technical stuff that is not very good, the gore effects. They're nowhere near as good as any of the other films in the franchise. And there's some god-awful decision-making when it comes to some of the twists and the inclusion of Dr. Gordon. That is kind of very frustratingly bad. But I really do enjoy this, and honestly, probably be one of the Saw movies I revisit and watch the most simply because I enjoyed it. Another negative is the traps in this movie are unnecessarily complex. For what the traps actually do, there is no reason whatsoever for them to be as complex, especially when you get into the main character's wife and the trap that she's in. It's an oven, and yet there's like all of these things that add nothing to the oven aspect of the trap. They're just so unnecessarily complex and for no reason at all. And from this point forward are all movies that I would give a thumbs up to. And so with that being said, kicking off the top 5 is Saw 3. Now this is one of the fan favorites in the franchise, so it might be a little bit lower on my list than most people's list, But that's mainly just because this movie severely lacks a compelling ticking clock to help with the urgency of the situations. You have a ticking clock somewhat in the whole bomb around the wife's neck, but when it comes to the actual like traps storyline and the father dealing with the people responsible for his son's accidental death, there's no clock there. And it just feels like it could possibly last forever and just go on, and it just makes the movie feel a lot more dragged out than it actually is. Next on the list is the newest film in the franchise, Spiral. Now, I actually went in expecting this to possibly be the best in the franchise. That wasn't the case, but it was still pretty good. I'd still give the thumbs up. It wasn't nearly as good as I kind of anticipated or expected, but I still had a lot of fun with it. I love the concept of and idea of kind of manipulating the John Kramer's original ideology and place, but changing it from individuals to systems, and I loved that idea that it goes for, and I love the symbolism of the spiral. But almost similarly to Saw 3, it kind of lacks that ticking clock that almost all the other movies have. For instance, like the first movie, you have like a 6-hour time frame. The second movie, you have like the 24-hour or whatever time frame. Not 24 hours, 2 hours. And all the other movies have a similar time frame and ticking clock in them. Whereas like Saw 3 and Spiral, they don't. And so you don't get that sense of urgency that you want in a Saw movie, in my opinion. And then the traps, I don't think the traps are bad. I just think the actual editing and execution of them is just very lackluster and quick. That you don't actually get to take in what's going on with the traps. And not just like see the gore of the traps, but actually take in the thematic parts of the trap. Like a guy losing his tongue because he lies in court. Like those kind of thematic elements get lost because of how quickly. Now, actually one of my biggest negatives I actually forgot to bring up in my review. I completely forgot about it. And that's the fact that the Jigsaw voice sounds like a ripoff of Siri. It's not scary at all. It adds nothing to the movie except negative aspects. It makes me kind of laugh or roll my eyes whenever I hear it. Whereas if you had like a gruffled voice or something like Tobin Bell, that kind of adds to the horror of the movie. And I'm kicking off the top 3 with a lot of controversy because coming in at number 3 is the original Saw. Look, the movie is great. The writing is spectacular. James Wan has some... You can see that James Wan is going to be a great director. The guy who brings us The Conjuring and Insidious and some of the greatest horror movies of the last decade. Same goes for Lee Wan-el. For whatever reason, I never feel what everyone else feels. I can recognize that the script is phenomenal, but when it comes to the actual visual execution, it feels low budget to me. And I'm all for low budget horror, but I don't like it when low budget horror feels like low budget horror, and this movie kind of does to me. The production and everything, it just feels kind of low budget. It feels TV movie-esque to me. The entire franchise kind of does, in all honesty, except for Jigsaw and a little bit of Spiral. To me, this feels like an amazingly made TV movie that just happens to have the script of a great theatrical horror movie. And coming in at number 2 is Saw 6. Now, objectively speaking, I actually think the original is better than Saw 6, but when I put personal favoritism in it, I would rather watch Saw 6 than the original. And that's mainly just because I have a lot of fun with this whole fun house feel that this particular installment has. And I just get a kick out of the whole insurance salesman plot line and the whole choosing to die and all the metaphors and everything that goes into that. I just get a whole kick out of that. But I will admit there are elements to it, particularly on the Hoffman side. It's the best Hoffman's ever been, but at the same time, it's Hoffman. It's one of the weaker, one of my least favorite characters. He's one of the most developed, but he's still one of my least favorite characters in the franchise. And now, my favorite movie in the Saw franchise, and that is Saw 2. From the very beginning, I knew I was going to love this movie when you have that Venus flytrap and that whole death mask opening, one of my favorite openings. And then the ending, I think, is phenomenal. The original movie has a great twist ending, a twist ending that's more surprising. But I think Saw 2 has a twist ending that's more compelling. Mainly because in the first Saw movie, there's no hints or anything. It's just, the dead man randomly wakes up or gets up, and you're like, holy shit. Where in Saw 2, you don't see the twist coming, but at the same time, it was telegraphed. It was like strategically telegraphed and placed with the lines of dialogue. And so when you go back and rewatch it, you see all these little lines there. And I kind of enjoy that a little more because it adds to the rewatchability of the movie. And I think Donnie Wahlberg is the best character in the franchise. And because I love the story they give and how they develop him and his son's relationship. It develops, and yet they're never in the same room. And yet it develops just as well as it would if they were in the same room. And I just really enjoy this Saw 2 as a spectacular horror movie. It's a great horror movie, and in my opinion, is definitely the best in the franchise. I know it's going to be kind of unpopular, but I love it to death, and that's why it comes in at number 1. Thanks for watching my controversial ranking of the Saw films. Go ahead and share your thoughts and rankings of the Saw franchise in the comments section down below. Did you enjoy Spiral? Do you enjoy Jigsaw? Do you enjoy the original run of 7 movies? Tell me your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this ranking, go ahead and smash that thumbs up icon, smash that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell as well to stay up to date. I'm going to review The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It when it releases, and then after that I'm going to do a Conjuring review series over this summer, and so stay tuned for that. And as always, have one hell of a good time.
What's gonna work? Teamwork. What's gonna work? Teamwork.
Holy shit.